Supreme Court parental rights case, Makmood v. Taylor. Who wants to set this one up? What's going on? Anybody want to take it, or I'll pass to Anna, unless... So, you want to jump on
essentially, my understanding is there is a cohort of different religious families. We're talking Muslims, Jewish people, Christian families, who want to see an opt-out option available for a range of books that have been introduced for pre-K and elementary school children. Now, initially, when this push came out, that was a part of a whole, inclusivity push back in 2022. They said they were going to release these books and distribute them to the children. However, they would make parents aware, and there would also be an option to opt out. By 2023, that was rescinded, and this is why the parents are now taking it to the courts, because essentially what the schools initially promised them was retracted for no apparent reason. And for these parents, they want to be the ones to decide when they have these sensitive conversations with their kids, not the school.
Yeah.
And my perspective is there is nothing wrong with that. I think we should be.
Amen.
We should be dealing with these things within our families and not deferring to the school system to take care of it. So, I mean, I'm in full support of these families who are seeking recourse for this and who want to maintain the rights over what their children learn. I mean, for me, there's nothing wrong with that.
So there's a few other details to this that I think are super relevant, because what we're talking about here are not high school students. We're talking about elementary school students. And what I thought was really fascinating about how this school district approached this issue is, given the nature of these books and how it brings up things like same-sex couples, you would typically find this type of curriculum in the context of health, right? Like health curriculum. But the school district decided to put it under the context of literature and English. And so I wonder if they did that intentionally to prevent the opportunity of students to, parents to opt out. Because if it's in the context of health and, let's say, sex ed, that's when you have an opt-out option typically when it comes to some of the more controversial issues that religious parents have problems with. Now, in this case, elementary school, we're talking about 4th graders and 5th graders, super young, like 8, 9, 10-year-olds. You're talking about same-sex couples. Yeah, I agree. I think that especially religious parents want the opportunity to opt out so they can broach these topics with their kids themselves. And they're not trying to ban these books. That's a really important distinction here. They're saying, you know what? Keep teaching, using these books. That's fine. We just want the option to opt out. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. The fact that the school district wants to prevent that, I think, is super problematic, to be honest.
So I agree with you completely on that. I want to go back to the days where we're just reading like Clifford the Red Dog or whatever. We leave it to the parents. And I'm speaking as a Christian myself. Like, I would feel, if I had kids today, I would feel deeply uncomfortable if my kids were indoctrinated and had no choice of stepping out. And you can opt out of sex ed classes. People are given that choice, but you can't for these books.
Well, the issue was they did promise an opt-out initially, though, and that's the thing. When it was introduced in 2022, it's like, so why are you going to offer that and then rescind it a year later? I can see why people would feel a way about that in any context.
Let me get comfortable for this one, because I'm alone.
I listened. Hold on, sorry, Jillian. So I listened to the entirety of the Supreme Court hearing on this, and I thought it was really interesting because, one of the arguments that the defense made, and in this case, the defense, of course, is the school district, is, look, we wanted to give an option to opt out, but it became too difficult to do so. This is a diverse school district with a lot of different religions. We're talking about Muslim religion, Christian religion, all sorts of religious folks. And making the accommodations for these students to opt out was difficult because where are the students going to go? We need to have teachers to take care of them as the other students are going through the curriculum. That's an interesting argument. The Supreme Court justices didn't appear to really buy that argument based on what I heard. But what I thought was really fascinating was Justice Elena Kagan, a liberal justice who was, appointed by Obama, actually agreed with the conservative justices in regard to the nature of these books and how the content of these books is not appropriate.
So that's what I want to litigate. I must have missed something, because when I looked it up, here's what I found. Pre-kindergarten Pride Puppy. Can we maybe pull that up?
Do we really need a gay dog?
But
I'm okay with Pride Puppy. I don't think Pride Puppy is a problem.
I think what they're trying to establish is that there are all different kinds of people and all different kinds of families, and by acclimating the kids to like, oh, look, you know, the next one would be Uncle Bobby's wedding. Like, oh, Uncle Bobby is gay and is married to a man. So it's not so foreign and so gross. And I say this simply because the way I was brought up many moons ago, it was foreign and it was gross, and I didn't know anybody who was gay except the interior designer that my dad would refer to as the queen bee, or some quote. I don't want to say the D word because YouTube will legitimately like demonetize the episode, but that word being used in a derogatory fashion as I was growing up, and I was homophobic for such a long time. Whereas I wonder if there was Uncle Bobby's wedding as a kid, it wouldn't have been gross and weird and foreign. So then the next one is first grade, intersection allies. We make room for all. Second grade, My Rainbow, a narrative about a mother supporting her transgender daughter. Now that one, I get it. Transgenderism in kids is tough when it's a separate conversation, but especially when it becomes medicalized, then you lose me entirely. Social transition is also really controversial, but nevertheless.
Again, a slippery slope.
I get it. Prince and Knight, a fairy tale where a prince finds love with a knight. So, in my opinion, they're not like leather daddy goes to the bar.
Right.
You know, it's not sexually inappropriate. It's exposing kids to love is love. Don't let it be creepy and gross.
Do you mind if I make a little quick point here?
Go,
so there is one example that I want to bring up that I personally, I would not be okay with my children reading this because I think
maybe I missed one.
I think this sparks confusion. Sometimes I just use one set of pronouns. Sometimes I change my pronouns. Sometimes I use all the pronouns I can think of. My pronouns are like the weather. They change depending on how I feel. This is not a healthy message to be sending children. Not only that, there was another thing that was quoted in an article.
By the way,
where in the book they were.
But that's if that's in there, you're correct.
And also, not only that, within a book, they were actually asked to engage in an activity where I believe it was grade 2 children were instructed to pick out certain words. The words were inclusive of things like drag queen, leather, underwear.
Yeah. All right, that's outrageous.
Jill,
if that's in there, you're 100% right.
Jillian, I totally get what you're saying. My main issue is that this thing has largely become a social contagion. I agree that there is a large portion
transgenderism
of and even gayness. Honestly, I would say even gayness. The rate of women who identify as bisexual has gone up astronomically. The rate of people who identify as non-binary has gone up astronomically. Kids are easily influenced. And yes, a large part of that is the fact that this is more socially acceptable. So some of them are more confident to be able to speak out about who they really are. But when we look at the stats and we see that my mom's generation, Gen X, was identifying as LGBT as a rate of 4%, and Gen Z is now identifying at a rate of nearly 25%. 1/4 of them are saying that they are identified within this group. It is more than just we need acceptance. This is a social contagion.
Hold on.
Look, I don't know if someone who's straight can be convinced to be gay. Like I just I don't know if I'm really buying that.
Well,
however,
also there's no harm.
Yeah.
Well, here's where I would also differentiate. If you're, I'm sure that people who are religious will take offense with this, and that's not my intention, but there's a monster-sized difference between sterilizing a child with cross-sex hormones permanently, preventing them from ever having an orgasm with a medicalization of gender-affirming care, gender dysphoria, than your kid, a boy kissing a boy, a girl kissing a girl.
That's why I agree with that. That's why we should divorce LGB from T, because the T is just like making everything just frankly contaminating all of it.
Okay, we're going off the rails a little bit here in regard to like the actual case, because the case is specifically pertaining to individuals who have a sincerely held religious belief, right? So you can be as offended by the curriculum as you want. There's no constitutional protection against being offended. However, when it comes to these public schools, they do need to make accommodations for religious families who have sincerely held religious beliefs. And so that's why this case has made it all the way to the Supreme Court. I would have a problem with the school district being forced to ban these books, but that's not what's being asked. These parents are actually being pretty accommodating. They're like, we don't want to ban these books. We just want to pull our kid out of this class and opt out.
Yeah, I see that. And you know what? I'm largely there. I guess what concerns me is that, and we should probably, I should probably jump to the Jordan Peterson psychotic right in just a moment. Right in a moment, because what concerns me is when we start to go from like, hold on, we shouldn't be giving children off-label cancer drugs for gender dysphoria, and there was no question that it was like less than 1% of the population, and it's skyrocketed, and there are elements inarguably that are social, which are impacting these statistics rising exponentially. But I just worry that if we start to remove any exposure to people who live different, it facilitates othering, and that's dangerous.
I get that.
That's a good
Totally
point,
get that.
but that doesn't prevent parents from talking about it at home, or even they can talk about it anytime. All these parents are saying is we don't want our students to be, we don't want our kids to be taught that in the classroom.
And I think
we can talk about
I
it
wouldn't
on
want any sexual content from my kids, regardless, by the way, straight or gay. So if that's in there,
Especially in
Again, I think
elementary
people
school.
No, you're right.
They're conflating the two issues here. This is not a book ban, and I know people get really heated about that, but that's really not what it is here.
Right.
This is just a classroom issue, and it's still going to be available in the libraries. Like, people can still get it.
Right, okay.
You know?
I see what you're saying.
Final thing I'll say about this story, sorry to interrupt you, but look, I get that everyone's obsessed with culture wars, that's fine, but can we at least pay a little more attention to the academics in these public schools? Because a lot of these kids can't read. And that's a huge
so
problem.
right.
This is the pandemic
You are
generation.
so right.
problem. Okay.
It is.
I want to say there was a scary moment I just saw
Is
yesterday.
real.
Yeah.
I'm dealing with it in real time.
It's bad.
Your kids, their
Oh
age,
my gosh, my son is going into 8th grade, and his reading, he's got a really high IQ. The kid's intelligent. He does struggle with some dyslexia, but nevertheless, we should have caught him up by now. But in California, the 2 years of not being in school.
It was
and by the way, I mean, Anna, because Anna's also in California right now, and I've had to go back and forth quite a bit over the last year. So my kids have been in school in California, and every 5 seconds it rains, no school. Fires, no school. Oh, it's raining again, and there's not 2 roads of egress, meaning 2 ways in and out. So if it rains, there could be mudslide. My kids have missed since January 1st 34 days of school.
That's crazy.
And they're not making up for it. And it's just, it's bananas what's going on, at least in California, which is a bit of a I went off piece there, but it's a huge
you're
problem.
right. Can I just say one thing about this generation? And to Anna's point, this pandemic generation is suffering.
It's bad.
I just saw
It is
something
bad.
yesterday that these kids have trouble identifying angry facial expressions. They just can't read it. They have trouble reading social cues. Like,
Is
they
that because of the
can't.
mask? Because everyone was wearing a mask during
That
that
too,
time?
but also because they didn't have these interactions that in their most formative eras, they had trouble differentiating between angry and sad.
My kids don't have that problem. They know when I am pissed.
Yes, you are very
I make that
emotive.
very clear.
You are very emotive. But these kids, they were locked in their basement, didn't have a chance to go to the playground, explore in recess.
A lot
and
of
they're
these
so
kids are
handicapped.
It's a
still locked
crime.
in their basement. Like, parents need to take the tech away, give them a bike,
Yeah.
go outside.
I don't know if those days will ever return. I wish. I honestly
Well,
wish
because that's
they
where their
would.
friends are. That's the other
Yes,
problem is that
exactly.
when I say to my kids, like, want to go have a play date with Gianni? Gianni's on Fortnite right now. And so is Michael, and so is Bodie, and like the kids exist in this
Exactly.
ecosphere online.
Honestly,
so
I'm
it's
so
tough.
glad-
Which is another topic for another day. But you all make great points, and it is a huge problem.
One final word. I'm so glad all 4 of us presumably grew up. Like, we had at least 10, 15 years without these things.
Oh yeah, you used to
it's
borrow
true.
groceries from your neighbor. You used to play in the street on your. I mean, I didn't have a perfect upbringing by any means, but I'm so glad I at least have those memories to look to and cherish. And like, it's sad to say I don't think that is coming back anytime soon.
No, it's not.
Unfortunately, and that's contributing largely to this mental health crisis and why so many people are susceptible to social contagion and these things, because they want to belong to a group.
Totally.
They want to belong to something, and especially because in the LGBT it's almost become like a protected class. If you're a part of that community, then you can do no wrong. You can say no wrong because your ultimate defense against that is, oh, you're a transphobe, you're a homophobe. So the wrong people flock to it. It also attracts bad actors, All I'm saying is that I just don't think that we need anything else to influence kids' minds on these sensitive topics aside from the people in their life who are close, who they
Amen.
trust, who they can have those conversations with.
I want to be done with this one, but I know the counter argument, and the counter argument is, what if their parents are bigots? What if their parents are racists?
Well, don't you think
it's a fight to shape the next generation, and it's. Then you'd have to make the presumption that the parents are such awful people, which is unlikely.
Jillian, I don't know if you're intentionally doing this, but that's essentially the woke argument. Like, we need to do this because they're not getting it at home.
Right.
That's what the Democrats are saying. And what I'm saying is,
It's not, but okay, look, it is not their place. It is not. Look, I don't, this is why I don't have kids, okay? Because I would be violent. I would be violent if my state, if my government tells me I'm not allowed to parent my own kid,
Right.
and that the school district gets to decide.
All right, I got one for you then. I'm going off
I'm
of,
going to be so
I got one
violent
for
about
you.
that. Oh, absolutely.
Hold on. Okay, so this is off of our subject grid here. I believe it's called the Safety Act in California. That the teachers don't need to tell you your kid is socially transitioning.
Yeah.
Now,
That's awful.
What's
So bad.
interesting about this is when people push back on it, they're like, well, the kid could be abused at home. There are laws in place to report child abuse.
So I need
mental and physical. You want to talk about negating the role of a parent.
I need the
God
left.
bless you, Gavin Newsom. I swear to
Yeah.
God, I hate that guy.
I do too. On this issue, on this particular issue, the left needs to make up its mind.
Yeah.
Okay? Because on one hand, they use this as a cudgel all the time if you don't play ball with what they're demanding. Oh, well, the transgender community, they have a high rate of suicide. Okay. So you're telling me that you are going to keep the identity of parents' children away from them, hide the fact that their child might be transgender, knowing full well that there's a high rate of suicide among transgender youth.
Right.
That's a little bit problematic.
And
no?
social transition does put them on a fast track to medicalization. I believe it's like 60+% greater chances of medicalization. Whereas if your child is socially transitioning, you should absolutely, for all the reasons you just mentioned, be an integral part of helping them figure out what is going on. By the way,
I want to provide, like, if I had a
support.
If I had a child and it turns out that my child might be transgender, is identifying as transgender, I want to make sure that my kid's okay. I want to be a parent.
It's outrageous. Personally.
He or she might need, help with a counselor or a therapist. I want to provide those resources. The school's not going to provide those resources.
And the issue with counselors and therapists now is they have to affirm at the same time.
Right.
In some instances, they're not even allowed to provide any type of reasonable pushback.
It is,
literally, there's
It is interesting
legislative hurdles that prevent them from providing that pushback. Back in the day, some of the first transitions, the first female to male, like long-term transition, a person called Buck Angel, right? Back then, you needed to socially transition and live as the opposite gender. I think it was for a year, maybe 6 months.
As an adult, you're
yes,
saying.
as an adult, before you're
So
even
far
allowed to
from
take.
that.
Well, exactly. But I think
Yeah.
any person who truly suffers from gender dysphoria, who truly would have their gender dysphoria alleviated by transitioning, I don't think there's anything wrong with those types of stipulations. That, for me,
Agreed.
is
I
measured by
completely agree.
wants.
By the
That
way,
is
you're
going to
talking
vet
about
out-
an adult.
Yes, but
this is a kid that can't even comprehend.
And so imagine how much worse
the
it is for
gravity
kids
of their
then.
choices.
So imagine how
And
much
can I just
worse
say-
it is for those kids then versus the adults.
Gavin Newsom and his cabal of social justice warriors
He's the worst.
have everyone terrified. And Nat, I'm going to give a shout out to Manect, okay? Because on Manect, I had a terrified mom from California reaching out to me, an Asian mom actually. She's so terrified of saying the wrong thing to her kid and then getting reported to Child Protective Services.
that's wrong.
Because
That's
she
wrong.
wants to be accommodating and she wants, like, what if my daughter is lesbian? I want to make sure that I'm embracing of her. I don't want to say the wrong thing. Like, what am I allowed to say? Like, what if I lose my kid? And this is an Asian immigrant who's just terrified that this is happening in our adopted country.
It's legitimate.
And this is what Gavin Newsom has created, this just hysteria, this tremendous fear. Parents and kids should not be inhabiting this world. This is outrageous.
One more bash on this guy.
Yes.
In 2013, he supported a bill, I think it was Jerry Brown's bill at the time, allowing transgender or biological boys, transgender females, so biological boys who've transitioned or socially transitioned, physically medically transition to either or to participate in biological female sports. Charlie Kirk goes on his podcast, This Is Gavin, and he's like, it's just wildly unfair. You supported this, you scumbag.
Yeah.
And you put no legislation forth to stop it. And I'm sorry, I owned a sports medicine facility. This is where I can really plant my feet firmly in a wheelhouse here on this show. There is no universe where there is a physiological equivalence between a child born a male and a child born a female. XY chromosome versus XX chromosome. A 15-year-old boy athlete, or XY chromosome athlete, however you want to label this, is better than the most elite female athlete in the world at 15. It is one thing to agree that people who are trans should live with dignity, but it does not subvert or negate the rights of another to have a fair playing field.
Girls and women got thrown under the bus real quick.
Yeah, where are the feminists?
Real quick.
Isn't that wild?
Yeah. No, it is wild, and I think it's wrong. And science, you either believe in science or you don't.
Right.
You don't get to pick and choose when science matters to bolster your argument. You either believe in it or you don't.
You're so
Yeah,
spot
and
on.
so can I just say, this whole thing has made me deeply uncomfortable, and so much so that I couldn't stay in the Democratic Party. Let me tell you what actually happened 2 weeks before Election Day. It was the final donor dinner. These are multi-million-dollar donors.
Can you please establish for anyone who doesn't know you, just give them real quick your background with the Democratic Party?
In short, I raised a shit ton of money for them. I was one of their top donors and fundraisers, raised millions.
Worked for the Clinton campaign and the Harris campaign, correct?
I actually was not an employee. I was part of their National Finance Committee, so I was one of the top donors that their staffers were like beholden to, essentially.
Okay.
It's a very corrupt system, and I'm ashamed that I was a part of it. We can go deeper another time. But what I
just
mean
want to
is,
establish like your knowledge set and how unique it is here.
thank you. And I was the one who helped expose the Beyonce and the Cardi B and the $500,000 to Al Sharpton.
influencers.
Exactly, the influencers and whatever. Stuff that they still, I gave them 6 months to contradict me, and they still haven't, because they know I'm telling the truth. But that's not what the point I was trying to make. 2 weeks, and I'm sorry if I offend anyone in advance, I just want to say, but this is the truth. 2 weeks before Election Day, we met at the Ritz-Carlton, of course, and the keynote speaker was Sarah McBride.
Oh,
Yeah,
the trans Congress.
exactly.
Person
Tim
for the
McBride.
trans
Well, I don't want to.
Can we bring up Sarah McBride, Nat? Thank you so much. Okay, so Sarah McBride is a trans congressperson?
Transgender congresswoman, yes.
Yeah, exactly. So
For California or where?
I don't
Delaware.
think so, yeah.
Delaware, okay.
yeah, so she, just so you know, the last dinner is supposed to be the most important dinner. Kamala Harris was supposed to show up, but she couldn't. She had a scheduling conflict. So this was the person that was supposed to represent the campaign. Like, this was the last hurrah. This is like October 20-something. And she spoke with Josh Shapiro. Like, she had top billing. And it made me deeply uncomfortable that she was feted as a hero. Everyone gave her a standing ovation. Like, this is some conquering hero.
Just because she was trans.
Just because she was trans. I was sitting next to the founder of Zillow, and I frankly left. I just couldn't. And everyone is clapping and like cheering for her. Like, why? What did she do?
Let me bring up a point, actually, that I can relate to personally, because I want to shield you from this in the event someone thinks that it's because you're anti-trans. Being a gay person, I've never understood gay pride. Now, I'm not ashamed to be gay anymore. As I mentioned, in my your mom's generation, Gen X's generation, there was a huge amount of homophobia, and now arguably the pendulum has swung obviously the other way. With that said, I never understood that concept, because it's like, what is there to be proud of? I didn't accomplish this. I'm not ashamed of it. I'm proud of a best-selling book.
I think in the beginning, gay pride was meant to make people who might be in the closet and they're terrified of their identity
not feel ashamed,
feel comfortable and feel pride about what their identity is. So I think that gay pride actually made a lot of sense.
You do? See, I never. I
mean, right now, I remember years after gay marriage was legalized and everyone seemed to be pretty accepting of gay couples. That's when it kind of became a little weird, right? Because it's like, all right, I mean, everyone's on board now.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I haven't really seen anything from Sarah McBride that makes me uncomfortable. Sarah McBride doesn't seem to go around like
suggesting that the fact that she's celebrated just because
she was the final
by virtue of her
speaker.
accomplishments.
Exactly.
To be fair, I mean, there are a lot of people in the country who are pretty hateful toward transgender people, even when they're not causing any problems.
That's true.
When we're not talking
That's
about,
true.
medicalizing children. I mean,
Absolutely.
But if she's
an
competent
adult
at her role, then what does transgenderism have to do with it? And so she should be celebrated on the basis of your work that you're doing to get to that position versus transgenderism.
I'm not entirely sure, so don't quote me on this, but I think what makes her different is she might be the first United States Congresswoman who's transgender.
She is.
Right.
I'm pretty sure that
So
she
it's
is.
historic,
That was the whole debate with Nancy Mace trying to change the Capitol Hill bathrooms and all of. Yeah, she's absolutely the first trans
I can't believe
congresswoman.
I'm again the person saying it. For me, it's not an accomplishment to be that.
I agree. I completely agree with you. I agree 100%. And I agree with what you said as well, Jillian. I think that maybe at the time when you've been relegated to the back of society and people don't care about you and you're disparaged and this and that, it makes sense to take the opposite turn when you're trying to make people accepting. Hence pride back in those days. But nowadays, what rights do gay, trans, lesbian people not have? If anything, they're more of a protected class than the average person. I make the same argument when people say, oh, there's so much misogyny and the women, they're so prevented from being able to have the same What is preventing you as a woman from having success? What is preventing you as a gay or transgender person from having success? Nothing. We've already overcome all of these things. Why are we still talking about it? I mean, there's a reason why, obviously.
Well, she's
and it's
a
an
pawn
interesting
also.
Jill,
She was used as a pawn there. I mean, they clearly are using this individual to put her. Look how torn
They
we
put her
are,
on a
and
pedestal.
they're the
literally.
bad guys. And
You're actually touching on something that I think has been a growing problem with the Democrats' identity, because especially beginning in 2015, and Senator Chuck Schumer, House Minority Leader, is on tape saying this during a Washington Post interview. They intentionally were moving away from working class voters and just kind of doubling down on their culture war identity.
Wow.
And when you do that, when you move away from the economic issues that used to make the Democratic Party great,
the Clinton Party,
and you just focus on culture wars, of course you're going to expect that. Of course they're going to use various people with different backgrounds as pawns for their political campaigns. I'm not surprised by that at all. But that strategy ain't working anymore.
Absolutely not.
People want to see their lives improved materially.
Absolutely.
And just simply, putting certain people on a pedestal depending on their identity, I think most Americans are realizing that's not really improving my life.
And thank God, but it honestly feels like it was just yesterday that was happening. And it really was.
It's still happening. The war is not done. Just the battle has been won.
I agree.
The war is still ongoing. And I want to say one thing to your point.
Yeah.
The T has absolutely hijacked the LGB. Let's not conflate
I don't even
the
get
two.
the acronym though. Hang on 1 second. Now you threw up a 5-minute, and I have 18 minutes. Do I have No, you're good. Oh, we're okay. I have 18 minutes. Okay, because I wasn't sure if you needed me to wrap it up. Hold on. Okay, so forgive me. Going back to, I've never understood the acronym. So first of all, is it who you like to have sex with? Is it how you identify? And
Jillian,
somehow everyone's in it. But you guys, hold on. The queer people, I don't even know what that means, by the way. Gays are in there, bisexual people are in there. So you sleep with women, you sleep with dogs, you sleep with, everybody's in there, except the heterosexual.
I mean, intersex,
you guys don't have a letter. Where's the H?
And every
There's ally. No, there's ally. There's ally. So that is for the straight people. They are
I think isn't ally for asexual?
Oh,
Meaning
that may be.
yeah.
There's 2 A's now. They added. No, there's 2 A's.
You'll never get to the bottom of it.
Jillian, every year they add a new letter. It's like LGBTI.
It looks like a Wi-Fi postcard at this point. There's so many letters. It looks like a Wi-Fi postcard.
To that point, this is why the Democratic Party is doomed. Hold on. Let me just say one thing. I'm so sick and tired of this identity politics, and it's just not just with the gays. It's also with every single race. I kid you not. I hosted Joe Biden on May 1st. It was supposed to be a normal event, okay? But because I was Asian, they thought it would be a good idea to make Lindy happy by bringing in a lion dance.
What?
I kid you not. There's video of this.
What's a lion dance?
It's something.
You can't just toss that out there and not explain it.
Dance.
Is that like the
Now you can't keep up with us. She's like LGBA, password code, lion dance. What the heck is a lion dance?
It's something that Chinese people dance on Chinese New Year. And by the way, Chinese New Year is sometime in February. I don't know when, but my event was in May.
That's hilarious.
So there's actually
That's
not.
so funny.
There's
We need to
not
get
a good
Pelosi and her
reason.
Rafiki
This is what I was imagining.
That's precisely it.
Shut
And they had the
up.
drums, they had the dancers and the costumes, and my guest and I were we had our jaws on the floor.
That's amazing. That's
because I
so
want to say
incredible.
something. This is not my culture, with all due respect. My culture is Britney Spears.
Oh, okay.
Okay, my culture
That's
is
also
how I grew
unfortunate,
up.
but it's okay.
But like they didn't ask.
Do you need a hug? I feel like you do.
I miss my Britney. I
Oh
do
my
admit her.
gosh. I'm sorry. Please continue. This is insane, though.
But this is what I mean. Like
that
it was supposed to.
insulting?
It was
It
so
is.
insulting. Like, I'm not an American. I have to be a hyphenated American.
That's crazy.
And the thing is, first it was, they call me AAPI. They call me their AAPI donor, Asian American Pacific Islander. The next year they called me AANHPI.
Wow.
And I was like, what the hell is that? They're like, oh, it's Asian American Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander. And they didn't ask if I wanted to be labeled as their fundraising leader for that. I just want to be American. Why are you putting me in this
Because you're filling
bucket?
a quota. That's
That's
why.
precisely
You're filling
it.
a quota.
But I didn't ask to be, and I don't want to be. I
see
grew
that.
up here. America's the only country I know.
I think one of the biggest problems in the country that no one ever talks about is the fact that because of the culture wars and because of identity politics, identitarianism, Americans don't really have a shared identity, right?
Right.
Everyone is basically instructed to hyper-focus on what their background is, as opposed to who they are as Americans.
Let me give a shout out to my generation here for a second, because we specifically were the love is love generation, and the idea was nobody needed a label.
Gen X, right?
Gen
No,
X.
Gen X was
We
the
could
best
just be-
generation.
well,
I'm just going to
okay,
keep
take it easy.
No, it was.
We're
Keep it at
deeply flawed.
100.
However, that is what we fought for. Love is love. Like, we're all Americans here. We don't need to divide people into
Yep.
their ethnicities and their religious backgrounds and their sexual orientations. It was meant to be like, people are people. I
Yeah.
don't know where all of that went so far wrong.
Let me ask you a question. Do you feel like this acronym here embodies it? And you might have thought
I
I was
would
being
be fine
hyperbolic.
with
Wait.
Okay.
Listen to it.
Okay.
Lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender. Okay, that's where it should
Two-spirit.
end, right?
Okay.
We have queer. We have questioning, intersex,
gosh.
pansexual, two-spirit. What the heck is a two-spirit?
Androgynous.
Anyways, androgynous and asexual. I knew there were two A's. I thought it was ally, but it's androgynous and asexual. Do you feel like these types
got
of acronyms are
two-
actually helpful?
Sometimes I wake up in the morning and I have no spirit, so I'm kind of,
Oh,
are they really marginalized?
Can I
have
borrow
two?
one?
Like,
Jeez. My gosh.
Oh my God, I would simply say, if you're going to do that, you have got to include heterosexual people in there. Then otherwise it's exclusionary by design. It's them against us against them, or by the way, wipe it, which I would obviously
Wipe it.
prefer.
Wipe
but if
it,
it's going to exist, because it's like, well, Jillian is a person. I mean, if you were to say, yeah, she's gay or she's married to a woman, okay, fine. You're telling someone like Jillian is married to a woman, and you can define it very quickly. She's lesbian or whatever the hell you want to call me. But when you purposely leave out straight, heterosexual, what do we call
But
it?
isn't
you
that
people?
everybody
Cis?
then? That's everybody, right?
Cis.
If we include straight people, that's everybody.
You guys are not in there.
But then if we include straight people, that's literally everyone.
That'd be everyone, and then I'm like, whatever.
I don't know. We haven't included various kinks into that
That's
group,
right.
Well, here's the thing.
All
This is
right.
my other issue that I take with it, Jillian, is like you hear of the MAPS, the minor attracted people, which is a community of pedophiles who are
What?
trying to legitimize
Stop.
the
out.
being a pedophile
The
as
Jeffrey
a
Epstein
legitimate
Society?
sexual attraction.
Well, we have one for that.
And
It's
there's-
actually called pedophile.
I know,
So you
but,
can put a
but
P
these
if you
pe-
identify.
but
I
these-
wouldn't do
no,
that,
no, no, no.
though.
These people, they have a flag. They have a flag. They have an acronym. They're trying to rebrand away from the word pedophile, and in large part, they're using the LGBT community, trying to latch onto it. And again, I don't think it says anything
No.
about gays
Amy
at
went
all.
somewhere so scary for me just there.
But we
Amy
can't-
went somewhere so scary.
it's attracting
Take me back
non-actors.
home, please.
I know.
I'm bringing you back to the center. I'm giving you Go. I'm gonna let you put a button on this one, and then I'm giving you guys a choice between the last two topics.
No one dared bring up this crap among Gen X. That's why I'm saying Gen X was like the more reasonable generation, right? The generation where you can have a political debate and the person you're debating with isn't automatically going to assume that you're a Nazi, right? Gen X, like, they're the workhorses. They put their heads down. They work hard. They don't go around judging other people. I'm obviously making a generalization here.
The 90s
really.
liberals. But with that said, we have a lot of shortcomings without question, and we're very rigid in the way we approach things. We're slow to innovate, and there's a lot we could say about Gen X that's negative. Thank you so much for watching Her Take. If you like the show, can you help us out by subscribing to the channel, clicking the notification button, sharing, commenting, joining the conversation? It helps us out a ton with the algorithm. We appreciate you.